Hello there. Good evening, everyone. This is Dari on WorldStreams Radio. Thank you to our listeners from all over the world for joining us tonight. If you'd like to learn more about WorldStreams Radio, visit our website at worldstreams.org. Our guest tonight is Fraad Wolff. Fraad Wolff is an economist, freelance researcher, and writer. His work regularly appears in the Asia Times, the Prudent Bear, the Huffington Post, the Independent, and many other international outlets. Based in New York City, Max does contract research on international financial risks and opportunities while also teaching in the New School University's graduate program in international affairs. Hi there, Saeed. Hello and welcome, Max. Nice to have you with us tonight.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hello, Dari, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and good evening to you, Max. Thank you for being with us tonight. In order to understand the economic crisis in the U.S., we need to have an idea about the basics. This is what every American wants to know. The U.S. had a projected surplus in the late 90s of $5 trillion. Now it has almost $7 trillion. So what happened?
Well, it's hard to believe, but you're absolutely right. 1 decade ago, we were discussing what to do with our surpluses, scolding the world for their profligate ways, and celebrating ourselves for our frugality. It was always a bit illusory, because those were always kind of based on long-term budget projections. And when you free a government looking for votes to make forecasts about its future revenues and costs, you are a little bit having the fox guard the henhouse. So they were a bit overstated, but we were certainly in much better shape. And the Bush administration, in its 8 years, managed to do something rather remarkable. Between the period of their election or selection and the period of their final departure, they managed to add as much total debt to the U.S. economy as we had added as a nation since 1783. So they doubled the national debt in 8 short years. And the quick and easy explanation, the view from 20,000 feet about how you would do that, is you basically drastically reduce taxes on corporations and on people's income while spending like a drunken sailor. And if you do it for 8 years and you do it with a federal government checkbook, you can do quite a lot of damage. And it's not an exaggeration to say that 3 or 4 cents of every tax dollar minimum, possibly up to more like 8 or 9 cents, of every tax dollar that every American pays for the next 30 years will be going to pay that back.
So in 2001, arguably, some people do attribute the economic crisis also in part, in an indirect way, to what is termed spend in order to stimulate the economy. How much of that has been detrimental actually to the crisis that the U.S. is living in now?
Quite a bit, and to be honest and to be fair, the Bush administration is only one piece in a bigger puzzle. They certainly took it to a higher level than we've ever seen it before, and they made the abuses of the past look small in comparison largely. I think Dick Cheney probably really did say one honest thing when he said that he doesn't care about deficits. I think his tenure in office proves that at least that comment was very accurate and honest, if maybe the others were a little more problematic. But there was a long history of this problem, and the federal government functions in a weird way, somewhat like a household. Imagine American households, and there are unfortunately a million of them too, who make less and less money each year and spend more and more each year. It just sort of adds up. So you end up with the cumulative effect of, in this case, both for households and the federal government, basically 3 decades of spending more than you get in income, and it eventually sort of balloons, and you get into a situation where you're borrowing to pay off the last bunch of money you borrowed because you've gotten so far away from the sustainability of your income being anywhere near sufficient to fund your spending. And that's sort of what's happening here. So we're getting into what's called a debt cascade, where the sheer weight of the past debts creates future debts in a sort of snowball rolling down a hill kind of scenario where the debt levels grow.
what is the status of the American taxpayer or the American taxpayer in the overall picture between what is considered spending and also what is considered as what has led to the crisis?
Well, the average taxpayer in the United States does pay a significant portion of their income in taxes for sure. That varies some by where you live in terms of state or possible municipal taxation as well. But the bottom line is that middle-class Americans are actually paying a pretty decent amount of tax, in part because we have a lot of people who can't find work and don't find work, and they therefore don't contribute much to the tax paying. And our large corporations and wealthy individuals pay amongst the lowest taxes in the world and amongst the lowest taxes in modern American history. And this shifts the burden to all kinds of middle-class things. And some of these are hidden taxes like lottery tickets and scratch tickets and all kinds of user fees. And the public is fairly hostile to taxes in part because for 30 years, the quality and quantity of social services delivered by the federal government has been deteriorating, and we've had a political and ideological mantra in the United States of debasing the government and denigrating the government and denouncing the government, and we've developed a national culture and sport of thinking that, Americans pride themselves on being good consumers, and they think that you should pay, it's not just the price, you should get high quality when it comes to everything but government. So we're people who want leather seats and CD drivers in our cars that we think those are worth paying for, but we want the cheapest, crappiest government money can buy, which is an odd sort of perversion that's developed here over the last 25 years as well.
But hasn't it been, though, that they wanted the cheapest government, but at the same time, I think they're ending up with the cheapest Chinese products at the same time. So has China really played any role in the transfer of technology and the transfer of knowledge and the transfer of American capital?
Absolutely. And China's a big part of the story because the Chinese and American economies aren't really two separate economies. They're really two sides of one economy. As major American corporations, through outsourcing and contract labor agreements and offshoring agreements, have moved increasingly to produce in China and then export to the United States, as well as Chinese and European and Asian companies do that as well. And so Americans have been forced by their falling wages to look for deals. And sort of the penultimate example of this would be Walmart, which distributes an awful lot of the output of the People's Republic of China. But, I mean, ultimately, the Americans got a slightly lower price for things, but a lot of the difference between what was once paid in wages and what's now paid in wages disappeared into corporate profits. So the general public didn't get that much from that because they paid 5% less, the company paid 40% less to produce it, and the rest of that money was taken away by financiers, middlemen, and profits.
So, in other words, this crisis has been up and coming for over 20 years?
Absolutely. The Chinese are funding
that point.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, the Chinese were buying 25 to 40% of our home mortgages in the boom years of 2003 to 2007. And they are lending the U.S. government a significant portion of money. That's how the Chinese ended up with $900 billion worth of U.S. Treasury securities. And so they've basically been loaning us the money to keep buying their exports, our imports, and Americans have been going deeply into debt to do that. And they're now loaning the government the money to bail the public out from the fact that it can't pay back the money the Chinese helped to lend, among others, to American citizens to buy their exports, because the Chinese are as dependent on American consumers over consuming as anyone in the United States. That's what I mean. Two different countries, not exactly two different